PRSA New York hosted an event featuring Rebecca Blumenstein, the deputy managing editor of the New York Times. Doug Simon, CEO at DS Simon Media, moderated the event. In this section, Rebecca discusses the role that diversity and inclusion plays at the New York Times.
I think that there are a lot of opportunities there, and I would, I guess, talk to both men and women. I think my biggest piece of advice is to choose a partner well and choose someone who will support you. I think that the whole vision of women in work is far too negative. I think that there are just a lot of people who are making it work, and sometimes the edge extreme cases end up, speaking too loudly. And I have 3 kids. I have a husband who's been very supportive, but he doesn't do everything, and we have rough edges, and sometimes, we don't have the perfect cupcake, or our house is a mess, and I think if we gave ourselves a little bit more of a break in terms of like falling short of this like Instagram ideal, it becomes a lot more doable. And I think that being a parent has made me a much better journalist. It taught me how to be a manager, and it also has made me like much more.
You can't fire your kids. At least until they get to a certain age.
But it also is like this forced balance, I think, in life that makes you think better. I do think that taking a step away from parenthood, though, women have a lot of opportunities, but do face continued dynamics in the workplace that make it hard. And I'm putting aside the parenting issues because I think ultimately those are personal choices, and the workplace is still not as flexible as it should be for women. It can still be hard for many to make points in meetings, for them to feel like they're heard. There are not enough role models. The number of female CEOs is actually falling. In some ways, you can say we're in a crisis of leadership, and we don't talk about race nearly as much as women, and I think that is a special a challenge, and a really urgent challenge, because I kind of feel like women, that we're talking about these issues much more, and we're much more comfortable talking about those issues, and the Times is actually convening a summit on race in December, and I think we're the first major media brand to do that, because race needs to be talked about a lot more.
It's interesting that you mention that, because through a source of mine that I understand at the upcoming Whitney Biennial, Alexandra Bell, the artist, is going to be featured. And what she does in her work is examined New York Times stories and looked for them within them where there's just prejudice or perspective that's not necessarily comfortable, and actually rewrites and recreates what they might have been. There's a piece she did on the Michael Brown killing in Ferguson, where she was sort of objecting to one of the articles that sort of had like 2 people who sort of had this rendezvous, giving almost the police officer and Michael Brown a similar level, and she sort of evolves it to, promising students playing, like was her caption that she would have liked to have seen instead of the negative. And I'm not going to put you on the spot about that per se, maybe a little bit, but we all think that it's only President Trump attacking the Times. There are lots of forces in society, and race is one of them. So how is that with diversity? And it's a challenge on PR. How are you trying to bring more diversity into the news?
Well, Dean Baquet, first of all, the editor of the Times, is African American. He's made history. He is also one of the very best investigative journalists who's ever worked in the industry, and is a great leader. But one thing we're doing under AG, our new publisher, is we're committing to aggressive goals. We're being transparent. We now, and I don't know how many of you when you work for companies, publish how you're doing on diversity. but we are now looking at this quarterly and once a year. The Times had a certain number of hires last year, and a very large percentage of them were either women or people of color, and we're very committed to, to changing this. A huge part of it is transparency, but even though all this is said, it is not moving fast enough. And so we all need to question ourselves. Are you getting diverse slates? Are you working as hard as we need to get that diversity? So it's an ongoing process. It's hard.
Yeah, huge changes this week on a positive side at CBS News,
Yeah.
where Susan Zirinsky, who's been put in charge, and just elevated Nora O'Donnell and obviously Gayle King to be the top point of the morning news show. So how key is it to get more women and minorities as leaders to improve these opportunities?
I mean, I think it's pretty critical. It's not, women. You don't want to. You have to be careful. You don't want to generalize about behavior, but I think Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, kind of showed us how differently women can lead, and in the middle of that crisis was, listening, being, empathetic, being, very responsive. Like
I believe she was the first leader to have a child while in office.
Yes. And so I think that was like a very powerful example. It really worked to kind of diffuse the situation. There have been studies that have been done that have shown very consistently that we don't do this because it's the right thing to do, although most of us support that. It also just makes more sense. You're going to make better decisions if you have a diversity of viewpoints and backgrounds. And the more that we have kind of groupthink, the worse will be. So I think it's been pretty distressing to see the number of female CEOs actually fall by 25%. In many cases, some of the pioneers are stepping off, and they are not being replaced by other women or people of color. Ken Chenault, the CEO of American Express, left after many years of very respectable career, and said that he was really distressed that race had actually gone backwards. And so I think these are all warning signs that need to, and Melanie Hobson, who's the chairwoman of Ariel Investment, she actually at DealBook a year and a half ago, it should have gotten a lot more coverage than it did. She called for a corporate Kaepernick moment. Like there has to be a discussion about race in the workplace, just as we've been discussing so much about, the Me Too movement and the workplace. But these are far from resolved issues, and I think all of us can do better. We can mentor more. We can, if someone makes a point in a meeting, say that's a good point. We can back each other up. We can all play a role in helping to solve it, and really need to.
Yeah. So how do you interact in your job with what I call talk radio on television, which is the cable news opinion shows and influence and impact that they have, when a lot of it is rehashing? You've got your own reporters on there, so you guys are playing a part in that. Does that influence coverage in any way, or?
Not really. I mean, if you're a political reporter and you're in DC, and perhaps you're tuning that out, but we like to influence. I mean, a number of our people appear on those shows, and I think it's been interesting to watch more Democratic candidates appear on Fox. And Smart, and we also appear on Fox, but I would rather be kind of setting the agenda for the cable networks than us taking it from them. We don't really get too much into the weeds of the pundits and all of that, because it would just take too much time.
Thank you for that. So, but given that there have been so many political attacks against the press and changes such as Me Too becoming an issue, is that going to change, how you're covering the upcoming election? And you weren't with the Times in 2016, so you can't get praised or blamed for that, depending on your perspective. But is that a need? I'm sure that's a topic of discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in Detroit last weekend with the national desk talking about, coverage plans for the year, and there is definitely, a renewed sense of, priority about making sure that we have a good sense of what's happening in the country, on the ground, looking at data, looking at how, kind of what's going on with the economy, with jobs, with college, and trying to kind of capture the what's actually happening on the ground and what polling is telling us. So I think it's going to be a very fascinating competitive race. I mean, and the economy is doing quite well nationally, the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. But I would say there's also a disconnect, and many people it doesn't feel that way to a lot of people. And there's a lot of uncertainty out there about jobs, and a lot of the jobs that people have are kind of more two-tier jobs. So they're $15 an hour jobs, or they're not full-time jobs, and so we
the gig economy as well.
And the gig economy as well, absolutely. So I think there's fewer and fewer people who have a traditional job with benefits, and I think that Americans, polls will tell you, feel nervous and apprehensive about the future. The optimism in China is much higher than it is in America, and it's interesting. The 2016 happened just after that kind of index changed, and Americans then felt more negative about the future than positive for the first time. So all of this, immigration, I mean, the court, it's rather endless. And we just have to be really sure that we're doing things and not, he said, she said, balanced with every single story, but that we're doing stories that illuminate, that expose, and raise, questions, and ask tough questions of the candidates, it's front and center, and it's already here. The thing is that Iowa primary is in February, so it's really happening soon.